So, President J.D. Vance, the third president in Donald Trump's triumvirate, with Elon Musk being the other president, decided to provoke Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky during his visit at the White House in the Oval Office on Friday, February 28, 2025. Well, as Zelensky decided to respond, that seemed to have lit a fuse in Donald J. Trump, who in turn started berating, bullying, and attacking Volodymyr Zelensky in front of a global audience. And not only that, Trump's administration then unceremoniously decided to ask President Zelensky to leave the White House for a meeting that initially was presented as the signature of a mining deal. So, what in the world happened? In today's discussion, we will go through the fallout of this diplomatic disaster. Not only that, we'll also see how the Global PAC should respond to what just flabbergasted a global audience. So there you have it. Let's fasten our seatbelts, let's get to work, and let's dive in. Once again, Global PAC family, AfriKili family, Global PAC nation, welcome to another edition of the Global PAC show. This is Tony Fumusimba. Such a pleasure for me to be once again in front of you on this Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. Thank you to all of you who continue supporting this fairly new live format since we launched it on January 13, 2025. For those of you who might be new, who have not done so, let me just take a moment and ask you to please click on the subscribe button. It only takes a second, and you would help this platform grow and help us reach all the objectives that we've set for ourselves in 2025. And I have no doubt that we will attain those objectives. But thank you very much for your support. Continue doing so. And also remember to visit our website, www.afrikili.com, to check past versions of our blog entries. Also, enter your email address so that future blog entries will be delivered directly into your mailbox. All right. So now, before also touching the subject, it feels like it has been a century since I have come on the air. I was not able to come on Monday, so 2 days ago. Nor yesterday, I had to deal with an emergency, as life happens. But I have been itching to discuss this subject ever since it happened on Friday. Unsurprisingly, just like I presume many of you, I was flabbergasted by what I witnessed in the Oval Office. It was unbelievable. And I'm glad that finally I'm able to come on the air and discuss that topic and discuss different angles of it. It's a topic that has been dissected globally, and I'm sure you've heard so many different angles, and I will try to bring a different angle today. But what I will do with regards to this topic, so first I will just kind of quickly recount some of the events the way I see them, and then we will analyze some of the fallouts of that event. And then thirdly, we will not only analyze what happened, but also just actually see what's happening around the world as a result of those events. And finally, I will look at the Global PAC, and just looking at the Global PAC specifically, and also how, in my estimation, the Global PAC should respond in a strategic way so that the Global PAC ends up coming out on top of what is unfolding in front of our eyes. All right, so let's start as a quick recount of what happened exactly on that day, with news happening fast and furious. Just a few details in the event you might have forgotten. But anyway, so we had this meeting that has been announced as a victory lap as to where Ukraine was going to come to the United States, was going to sign a mineral deal so that the United States would have access to Ukraine's rare earth. Donald J. Trump himself announced that, and so the MAGAverse and the Republican Party and everybody was anticipating a victorious visit from Zelensky. So Zelensky comes to the White House, And from the get-go, we should have received a hint of what was about to unfold. Because as Zelensky exits his vehicle, is greeted by Donald J. Trump, and immediately Donald J. Trump comments on his dress, on his outfits. If you recall, he was saying something about, man, you were dressed up for the occasion. And he talks to the cameras and really points to Volodymyr Zelensky's fashion, which, as we all know, from the moment Russia decided to invade Ukraine and the war began, Zelensky pledged that he would no longer wear a suit in support of his people who are fighting for their lives and his soldiers. So he's decided ever since to wear that garment as a respect for his people, to showcase his continuous connection to his people. So that has been his communication. Nobody has had a problem with it across the world. It's been welcomed even in the United States before. He's spoken to all the different chamber of Congress, leaders around the world. So it has really never been a problem until apparently not now, as Donald Trump, and we'll see how this is something that has been discussed more at length. But anyway, so Donald Trump welcomes him and talks about his dress. And then later on, as the two men, or Donald Trump's team, with President J.D. Vance sitting also by his side. Obviously, President J.D. Vance being now apparently the third president in this triumvirate from Donald Trump. The other president being Elon Musk. But anyway, so Trump and his team was on one side, and then on the other side you had Volodymyr Zelensky's, and his team. Well, when the question were reporters were now asked to ask their questions, we have this individual who, like, just shoots an arrow at Zelensky and asks him why he doesn't dress up. Again, this dress issue comes up, and this reporter seems to mention that, yeah, this has been an issue for many people in the United States who do not appreciate that. This reporter is actually called Brian Glenn. He is the boyfriend of Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you're in the United States, I know you know who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. He does not get more MAGA than Marjorie Taylor Greene. It is representative from Georgia. So this reporter, Brian Glenn, is a White House chief correspondent for a conservative news outlet. So he is her boyfriend. So he's the one who asked Zelensky about his outfits. And you could just see it from Zelensky's eyes, wondering, what in the world is going on with these people? Is there nothing more serious to ask about other than one's outfit? As a matter of fact, later on, as he was responding to Trump, he was saying, yeah, I have more serious things to discuss than to discuss my costume. Obviously, costume in his language means a suit, and which actually even, for people who speak French, some places in Europe, suits, what in the United States is called a suit is called un costume in French, costume in different places. So when he talked about costume, he was referring to his suit. But as a quick thinker, he told the reporter anyways, you know what, yeah, maybe when the war is over, I might wear a suit, and maybe a costume just like yours, pointing to Brian Glenn. But you could see in his eyes, obviously, that he was really wondering what in the world was happening. But then, in the course of the conversation, J.D. Vance, who apparently the very ambitious politician who has risen quite rapidly to be who he is today, the vice president officially, but as he showed us recently, seems to be the third president of the United States. When he went to Europe and addressed the EU members, just rating them on behalf of Donald Trump, talking about there's a new sheriff in Washington who would stand for extreme free speech. He berated Europeans and just really upset many people, talking about how their values were no longer standing for their values, and so on and so forth. But anyways, J.D. Vance attacked Zelensky by telling him about how they should try a different way of diplomacy with Vladimir Putin. But also later on, accusing him of not being thankful, literally asking him, I mean, have you said thank you any time in this conversation? Which was so. Let me use what was Kamala Harris vice president term used. You remember when during the campaign, the term weird when he was referring to J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. This was definitely a weird suggestion because Volodymyr Zelensky, and it was counted as a matter of fact, has said thank you over 94 times to America and the American people. So this comment by J.D. Vance or request or pointing to the fact that you didn't say thank you, weird, because the man had said thank you so many times, has been thankful so many times. But then that seemed to be the spark that lit Volodymyr Zelensky's fuse, because he interrupted and said, okay, so pointing to JD, he reminded them of the many times that he himself negotiated with Putin back then, how, agreement had been signed, but how Putin had multiple times violated those agreements. So what diplomacy was J.D. Vance talking about, really pointing to the fact that maybe he's the one who was out of line here. But then as Zelensky was rebuffing some of those points, Trump did not like how things were unfolding, and so Trump joined the fray and just started also bullying Zelensky in front of this global audience and attacking him, telling him, you do not hold all the cards. Zelensky retorting, I do not play cards. And so they just started going back and forth, and until the meeting that was ended in an unceremonious way. At some point, J.D. Vance saying that maybe this should be litigated away from the global camera, but Donald J. Trump being true to himself, as you know, Mr. You were fired, Mr. Reality TV who loves the camera himself, actually retorted saying, no, this probably made for some great TV, which might suggest that maybe this was part of the plan, right? To really put on a TV show, but this was a real soap opera, a lot of drama that unfolded in the eyes of everybody, but in a way also it could be that Donald Trump was maybe also upset, because remember, he had announced that Ukraine was coming to sign a deal to giving away all of its rare earth minerals as a repayment for the billions that the United States had given to Ukraine as aid, and that Ukraine was not going to get the security guarantees that he'd asked, because Trump said he would not give any guarantee. He would let the Europeans deal with that. And so there would be a peace deal. So Trump really knew that he was about to sign it was going to be a victory parade for him. And some people suggest that maybe Marco Rubio also sold it to Trump and his team that way, that Zelensky was coming to capitulate and sign. And so when this meeting turned into a back and forth, and Zelensky is showing an inkling of rebellion here, that might also be one of the reasons why Trump decided to erupt and just really berate and attack him in front of a global audience the way we all saw. So in a nutshell, those are some of the things that happened, right? A recount of the event. Now, the fallout of that, or let's actually just look at let's look at the fallout, the diplomatic fallout of what unfolded. So if I consider the U.S., let's say the U.S. and the West, right? What's been called as the West. I'm going to leave out the global South for now. But quite frankly, it would appear that in the West, generally speaking, it's only mostly the MAGA folks, right, in the United States. So the Make America Great Again folks, that's the Donald Trump camp, or supporters and his cult followers. It seems like it will be only the MAGA and Russia who are the ones rejoicing the most from this diplomatic disaster the way it's being portrayed by it seems like the majority of everybody else I'm talking about the West here, but in the MAGA circle, so rejoicing, seeing, well, yeah, Donald Trump showcased the strength of the United States. Uh, uh, Zelensky has been unthankful. He's disrespectful also in the way, look at even the way he dresses as he comes. And then Russia, that has been working for weakening the West, weakening NATO, and seeing that here's somebody who's actually doing the bidding of weakening the West alliances and NATO. I mean, Russian TVs were spinning this in all directions and playing it 24/7 and really rejoicing of the way this meeting went, and really talking about how Zelensky was humiliated. So there's a lot of joy in the Kremlin, in Russia. So that, in a sense, is really unfortunate. And yes, so the whole thing about the MAGA position, talking about, let's say, there's many ways to go about it, but that whole dress, disrespecting the U.S. with regards to the way Zelensky is dressing, and so how it was good for that report of Brian Glenn to bring it to the forefront. There has been apparently a discourse in some of the conservative circles that Zelensky is disrespectful in the way in which he dresses up, which is so unfortunate, and which is so arrogant in a way, because it's not like Zelensky cannot wear a suit. He has communicated from the get-go that his people are suffering, his people are dying, so it's a way for him to showcase that he is connected and supporting his people. He's not doing it as a way to disrespect the United States. And the funny thing is that Brian Glenn, as he did the media circles, or the day after, and so on, to try to justify his questioning of Zelensky. And as people are bringing up Elon Musk, for example, and he's using it as an excuse. No, Elon Musk does not represent millions of people. Elon Musk does not ask for millions of dollars. So I'm not sure if it's because Zelensky is needing help that he should bow down across the board, including in his outfits. If that is the point, that, okay, as you're requesting help, then you need to forget, say, the imagery that you've been using, forget the cause that you're fighting for to support your people that you're representing. But no, because you come to our house and request help, we'll forget about the suffering of your people, how you communicate that, but you need to bow down and dress the way we want you to dress. That's really what it's about. Because, and the funny thing is, initially Brian Glenn was talking about, no, he is disrespecting, that Zelensky is disrespecting the most powerful place in the world, the most powerful office in the world. And so as you step into this place, you should dress in a way that's appropriate. But when people pointed out the contradiction with Elon Musk, that's when he added the element of Zelensky. No, it's not only just about the disrespect of the place, but rather the way in which you come asking for help, right? So blatant contradiction there anyways. So it's not because Elon Musk steps in that Oval Office. He showed us with his outfit. Never wore a suit, or at least for the most part, even in a cabinet meeting, wearing hats and his outfit. So that's beside the point. That's anyways. So that is ridiculous on all accounts. What Brian Glenn did, voicing some of these points that are circulating in conservative media, just plain ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And so in terms of the way Russia is rejoicing, I mean, this is adding a lot of credence to some of the theories out there that have been pushing the narrative that Russia must have some kind of compromise on Donald J. Trump. Compromising information, videos from his previous, visits in the Kremlin in the late 80s and so on and so forth. How he's been doing Russia's bidding, because really, it's hard to understand how by taking this position, the US is actually not strengthening Russia, which the US has presented as its enemy for the longest, while weakening its allies in Europe and so on. I'm talking about just policy positions here. I'm not saying I agree one way or another, but in terms of the way Donald Trump is behaving in this way, how is not strengthening Russia and weakening the U.S. traditional allies? It is clear cut, and so it's hard to find a justification. You can't also say that it's all about just saving the billions of dollars that the U.S. 160, $2 billion that the U.S. has given Ukraine. That's the reason why we want to get our money back. Some conservative circles are talking about over $300 billion, which has not been substantiated, not been proven. It's like 160 some billion dollars. You can't just say it's about the money. How many billions have the U.S. spent in different places? The U.S. has been systematically spending billions of dollars in its support to Israel, sending billions of dollars in other places. They have never asked for that money back. So since when is it because it's Ukraine? Now you need to get the money back, and so you need to give away your rare earth minerals. There is something very, very fishy about that approach, which again clearly is weakening the U.S. alliance. And so in terms of continued fallout, yesterday the U.S. announced that it was immediately suspending all military aid to Ukraine, for example, effective immediately. And that was before, like last night, Donald Trump gave an address to the nation in front of the Joint Chamber of Commerce of Congress with, also the Supreme Justices and so on. So the announcement was made before the meeting, the Donald Trump's address to the Congress and the nation de facto. And so during his announce, he mentioned how then President Zelensky had now reached out to him, saying that yes, under the leadership of the strong Donald J. Trump, under the strong leadership of Donald Trump, Zelensky was willing now to discuss peace. So in a sense, touting that his strong messaging and his strong method of dealing with Zelensky had now started bearing fruit. We shall see, but that's more of the fallout of the diplomatic disaster that happened in the White House. So as you can imagine, emergency meetings now across Europe. You have all these governments coming together, wanting to step out. On Sunday, you had a meeting organized by Keir Starmer in the UK, bringing Emmanuel Macron and all other presidents across Europe to come and see how they would strongly now deal with the situation themselves. So, and just, agreeing to the fact that the disengagement from the U.S. is real. And so now that sentiment that it can no longer rely on the U.S. as a reliable ally is effective. So the disengagement is effective, which in a sense to me is a bit sad. Again, I'm just talking about the West here. I haven't even touched the global South yet. Because I'm not sure if a lot of people within the MAGA circle understand what is happening as the U.S. is disengaging or weakening its alliances, right? You have to understand what is happening, because I don't think that message is pushed enough. Because you have to understand that the strength of the U.S. for the longest relied on the U.S. engagement across the world. The U.S. having its military. Last week I think I showed you the map of all the different military forces and bases across the world. How all of that infrastructure helps maintain the U.S. way of life. So by weakening its presence, gradually weakening its presence globally, you tell me, what do you think is going to happen if you stay on that trajectory for the longest? As to where now European countries start strengthening their military, start engaging into trade wars with the U.S., and start considering the U.S. less of a reliable ally. What do you think is going to happen with the way of life in the U.S. in the long term? When the U.S. now gets to a point where all those countries are now requesting that the U.S. removes its military presence, its bases from across the world, and then you already have a tendency of where the dollar is becoming weaker and weaker. How more and more economies are studying ways to step away from the dollar. All those things do not bode well for a U.S. dominance in the long term. It does not. Because again, the U.S. dominance, which became even stronger after the Second World War, relied a lot on all this infrastructure, where the U.S. imposed or even forced other nations to adopt its way of doing things. So this, if I'm in MAGA circle, those are things that need to be discussed as well. So the impact of removing U.S. military presence across the world, of disengaging, because as you're disengaging, you're creating a vacuum that will have to be filled. Where now European countries will look within themselves and might even look at other sources for alliances. And so, in terms of like the negotiation power that the U.S. had, will, contrary to what Donald Trump wants his people to believe, will start diminishing because the other parties will become stronger and stronger, and so will demand more. So, but it's chaos. I mean, that is happening. That diplomatic disaster and everything that followed afterwards is just causing chaos in the West. I mean, you have look at even Canada, traditionally one of the U.S. Closest allies. The trade war that started yesterday. I don't know if you followed the speech by Justin Trudeau, who's on the way out anyway, so politically doesn't really have anything else to lose. But how he was just being very direct, speaking to the United States population, talking about how this trade war will end up hurting the American people, as it's also hurting Canada, but it will hurt the entire North American alliance. And so, funny enough, here's Donald Trump, who came into power promising to solve a lot of the issues, especially the economic issues, talking about inflation, reducing the grocery bills, and so on. But it would appear that none of that is actually happening. And even as he was giving his speech in Congress last night, he touted many, quote unquote, many of the accomplishment about renaming the Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, about doing such and such, but none of the economic accomplishment. There's none. Rather, when he talked about the state of the economy, the only thing he was talking about was, oh, we inherited a very bad inflation, so we're working very hard to reduce that, but there's no achievement to showcase with regards to that. So, to all the MAGA world out there, you should also ask yourself, why is Russia rejoicing so much with what you're doing? It's things to ask yourself. So now, if I shift my focus into the global West now, the global South. So this is where the Global PAC comes into play. Remember, Global PAC means Global Pan-African Community. I'm talking about the African continent, the Caribbean, and that includes also population of African descent within the United States. So with regards to the Global PAC response, here I'm going to focus a bit more on Africa, even though the Global PAC englobes, as I say, the entire population. But let's look at what's the response in Africa, right? Because this disengagement is real, right? So Global PAC nations are seeing, everybody witnessed what was happening in the Oval Office. But surprisingly, I've seen there's two sets of responses. On one end, you have people that rejoice with how Donald Trump manhandled Volodymyr Zelensky. So you have a current that is actually very happy about that. The underpinning of this current is the fact that there has been an anti-imperialist sentiment in some countries of the global South that have seen the West, generally speaking, as contributing to the chronic bad situation in those nations. And so seeing how Russia and China, BRICS represent a counterbalance to the West dominance. So a lot of countries in the global South are happy when there's this image of the West weaken. And so they see that the war in Ukraine represent Ukraine being a proxy war between Russia and the West, generally speaking. So if the West is on the losing end of that war, the sentiment that is fighting that anti-imperialist seems to be happy, and I've seen that a lot in the reactions across the internet and so on. Many pundits that are happy and advancing it that way. To me, I find it a bit ironic in a sense, because if I take a country like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that is accusing a neighboring country, Rwanda, of invading it and using its troops to cause unrest and war in eastern Congo, it's a similar situation to Ukraine being invaded and attacked by Russia. But in the case of the DRC, it's where all these people that are blaming Rwanda and the forces behind it, to see some of those folks turning around and saying that Russia is actually justified in attacking Ukraine, it's a bit of a conundrum. It's a bit of a contradiction there. And those are opposing views. So if you're okay with what Russia is doing in invading, taking over Crimea, invading Ukraine, regardless of what the geopolitical underpinning might be, regardless of whether or not Ukraine is a proxy for a war between the West and so on, the fact remains that you have Ukrainians that are dying because of that war that was brought in by Russia. The same in the DRC. So if you agree with what Russia is doing, you might as well disagree. You might as well agree with what Rwanda is doing in the Congo, which I don't think any Congolese could agree with that. I mean, you have deaths, you have millions of people that have been displaced and died over the years. You have an aggressor. No Congolese can agree with that. And so how can you turn around if you're with that position and agree with what Russia is doing? To me, it's a bit of a contradiction there. But anyway, so that's one sentiment. Then you have another sentiment which essentially has been satisfied with a bit of a resistance that Zelensky had showcased, because the meeting was presented as a capitulation, right? Where Zelensky was going to sign away his rare earth minerals to the United States without any security guarantee, and just agreeing to a peace deal, a ceasefire, by relinquishing all the territory that Russia has taken, and like a total capitulation. And Zelensky did not sign that deal. So you have another current in the global south that seems to rejoice with that, because there's that sentiment. You might be familiar with this, right? There is a quote that is often used that was said by Henry Kissinger, and the quote simply says that to be an enemy of the United States is dangerous, but to be a friend of the United States is fatal. And here, people are seeing that here's a country like Ukraine, that's countries in the global south that are witnessing it. Here's a country like Ukraine that was a friend of the United States for a very long time, that agreed to relinquish its nuclear weapons, because Ukraine had nuclear weapons, agrees to relinquish its nuclear weapons under the understanding that the West would always protect it, and the United States would be there and preventing any Russian invasion. So Ukraine had nuclear weapons that they gave away. If Ukraine had its nuclear weapon until today, the situation would have been totally different. But now, to see that their friend is turning their back on them is a big, big, big blow, and the global south is witnessing that. You even have conversation going as far as Taiwan. I know I talked about the Global PAC here, but I was seeing how in Taiwan, for example, you now have discussions where people are saying, wait a second, the U.S. is saying they will protect us in case China wants to invade Taiwan, and the U.S. is there and helping us because of our chip manufacturing warranty, capacity. What would happen tomorrow if the U.S. decide to turn its back on us? You are starting to have those conversations in Taiwan. So politicians starting to strategize and say, okay, how we would deal with such an eventuality. So you have all these discussions that are unfolding in the global south. But understand that when it comes to the global PAC, we need to understand that the disengagement is real. The vacuum being created is real. Although I would say when it comes to Africa, for example, I don't think Donald Trump even considers Africa to be a friend or enemy. I think it simply just doesn't care about Africa, to be quite frank. I mean, during his speech yesterday in Congress, there's a line he even talked about. He was talking about Lesotho, how his Doge Department of Government Efficiency, in its effort to save federal funds, waste, discovered a program being run in Lesotho. So, Elon Musk helped save millions of dollars with that. But then Donald Trump say Lesotho, a country that nobody even knows about. That's the sentiment. I think when it comes to Africa, like honestly, Donald Trump does not care. He does not see Africa as an enemy or a friend. Simply in his eyes, Africa is unimportant. And so to me, that's actually an opportunity right there for African countries in the Global PAC to utilize this disengagement as a window to strengthen itself. Now, I like seeing the resistance. For example, I saw in South Africa. Remember, we made a show about the false accusation that Donald Trump made about genocide being perpetrated against white people in South Africa. No, he didn't say genocide. He was talking about the racist laws that were taking away land from white Afrikaners, and so how he would allow white South Africans to come in the U.S. as refugees, but then you had circles circulating that there's genocide. Well, I was glad to see that the court in South Africa stood up against that and just completely destroy those fallacies and in those false claims. There's no white genocide in South Africa. That is false. The white people in South Africa still own the majority of the land. So I was glad to see that the government and the courts came out to totally debunk those fallacies, those false claims made by Donald Trump and his administration. But beyond that, I mean, just looking at Africa and the Global PAC, generally speaking, again, I believe that here's an opportunity. This disengagement that is occurring is opening up a window. I like bringing up the mineral wealth of Africa, but we know there's an AI boom, right? There's an energy transition boom. And we know that when it comes to those natural resources, Africa is the richest continent with those resources underneath its soil. If you want to talk about, I was talking about the other time, was it what, cobalt? Well, when it comes to cobalt, which is essential for EV batteries, the DRC has 3/4 of the world reserves, of the world supply. You have countries like Madagascar and South Africa that also have a bit of cobalt, but the DRC, Democratic Republic of the Congo, has 3/4 of the world reserves. When we talk about copper, which is needed for electric wiring and so on, again, the DRC, you have Zambia, they have the leading reserves in the world. You want to talk about iron ore, you want to talk about gold. So Africa has all these resources that can allow it to start forging a bigger, I would say, number of partnership looking in different directions to really strengthen itself as a continent. And then ultimately, as I always believed, Africa, a strong Africa, a well-governed Africa, a prosperous Africa would actually be to the benefit of not only Africans, but it will be to the benefit of, one, the African diaspora, so immigrants, but also the entire Global PAC, people of African descent across the world, whether it's people in the Caribbean who would see this strong continent capable of advocating for issues for Black people across the world, African American in the US, people of African descent in the United States, in Europe. A strong Africa really would be the best possible, I would say, countermeasure and advocate for the improvement of the situation of people of African descent across the world. So here we have a window that really opens itself again with this disengagement, which we've seen with the US aid being interrupted for Africa, and it will just be the disengagement will continue happening during this administration. So it requires boldness, it requires strategy, it requires intelligence from African leaders to take advantage of that. As the show has gone on for 40 minutes. I have a lot more I could say with regards to this, but let me just interrupted here today by that point is like this engagement that for some reason MAGA and Donald Trump seems so hell bent on advancing, which rest assured in the long term is not to the benefit of the United States, because you're making other parts of the world now stronger, which means it'll negotiate even more, which means the superior position or bargaining power that the US had will end up diminishing over time. Will end up diminishing. But it's Donald Trump himself was bringing that about. And so the Global PAC needs to seize this opportunity. And our mission, as you know, within this platform, the Global PAC, which is under AfriKili. So AfriKili means African intelligence, right? And when I use the word intelligence here, it's beyond just smart, like, brain smart, even though I know and believe that people of African descent obviously have brains like everybody else or smart like everybody else, very intelligent. We have, historically speaking, and so on and so forth. But beyond just like smart, it's about information also, because intelligence can be seen as information. And so within the AfriKili and Global PAC platform, we believe in using African intelligence, so African information, to build strong coalition and bridges across the entire Pan-African diaspora. The exchange of information, education, and intelligence per se. So, and we'll continue doing that. But again, and that is also what we need to rely on as there's this phase of disengagement in terms of foreign policy by the United States that will just continue being pronounced within this administration. That is really opening a window. So to conclude the show today, I will bring about a quote that I think is very apropos with the subject matter at hand here. And so this quote is from Thomas Sankara, who is a prominent Pan-Africanist who was the leader of the country of Burkina Faso until he was assassinated. He's somebody who was a staunch Pan-Africanist. He's somebody who believed in the cause of even African Americans, of people of African descent across the world. As a matter of fact, he came to the United States a few years ago and gave a rousing speech in the Bronx. So this quote here by Thomas Sankara, which, by the way, happens to be another one of my many heroes. Let me make it bigger so you can see, you can read better on the screen here, because the quote is quite long. Let me make it a bit bigger. There you go. You should be able to read it better. All right, so here essentially the quote says, you cannot accomplish fundamental changes without a certain amount of madness. In this case, it comes from nonconformity, from the courage to turn one's back on old formulas, from the courage to invent the future. It took the madmen of yesterday for us to be able to act with extreme clarity today. I want to be one of those madmen. We must invent the future. I really love this quote because it talks about the boldness that is required to reinvent the future, to really change things fundamentally. So I strongly believe, as the world is undergoing this, there is a significant change that is unfolding in the world. If you follow geopolitics, you see that is unfolding. There is a realignment that is gradually occurring. There are BRICS nations that are rising up. So this is the moment, in my sense, to really significantly on a geopolitical stage start rebalancing the state of affairs and the different bargaining power. And when it comes to Africa and the Global PAC, like, Africa has the natural resources. Africa has the human capital with the youngest population in the world. Africa has a rich diaspora, a smart diaspora across the universe, across the world. So all the ingredients are there to really help build Africa and transform it into the powerhouse that it once was. Because after all, civilization began in Africa. And so rebuild the continent to utilize its resources for the advancement and well-being of its people, but also for the entire Pan-African diaspora. And when that is done, then it's for the benefit of all humanity. Because once Africa sits at the table with strong bargaining power, then it means we're moving to a more equal world. And then peoples across the world can negotiate in better, in good faith, and we can just have a better, equal world. I strongly believe into that. But again, we need the madmen to build that future. This platform is part of that madness. I am part of that madness, and I will continue advancing that. The building of strong coalitions and bridges across the global Pan African diaspora so that we can raise our image, change the narrative, and build a stronger future for us all. I will end up here for today. Thank you very much for your continued support on this platform. If you have not subscribed to the channel yet, let me ask you to just take a second. Please click on the subscribe button so that you can become part of the conversation. Together, we can grow this platform and advance it together and reach the objective that we've set forth in 2025 and beyond. So as I'm closing, as I like to remind you, remember, we are a strong people. We're very beautiful people. We're capable people. Don't let anybody convince you otherwise. More importantly, we are the Global PAC. So until next time, peace be with you. Asante sana, which means thank you very much in Swahili. And once again, we are the Global PAC.